Hello. I hope by now all of you are aware that the Russia-Ukraine crisis has aggravated into a full-scale war. Russian forces have invaded Ukraine and have entered the capital city, Kyiv. That city may fall before the Russian army any time. Although Ukraine has launched a counteroffensive and has attacked the Russian city of Rostov, this Ukrainian counterattack is grossly inadequate when you compare it with the triangular full-scale invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Friends, these two countries have not only military asymmetry but also a great cultural affinity. Hence, in this context, let us try to understand how this conflict will affect the geopolitical matrix and the economical balance in the world. Well, speaking geopolitically, you would see that this crisis will further widen the rift between Russia and the West. In February-March 2014, when Russia invaded and annexed Crimea, the West reacted by throwing Russia out of the G8 grouping. In fact, that group was renamed as G7. The present conflict and the ongoing war will further develop a great trust deficit between the West and Russia. For NATO, it's a great opportunity to set its own house in order. There are several internal fissures in NATO, and if the NATO countries fail to come to Ukraine's rescue at this hour of crisis, then it would be a serious question mark on NATO's utility and relevance. Well, if we look at Vladimir Putin, we will understand that this gives an opportunity to Putin to assert his power in the world. And surely, if Putin succeeds, then this will embolden Xi Jinping. China is presently playing the wait and watch game. And if Russia succeeds and the West remains silent, then China will feel emboldened to attack Taiwan. Therefore, alarm bells have rung in Taiwan. South Korea will also feel the pressure because, like Ukraine, South Korea is enormously dependent on United States of America for its military protection. You see, friends, that the demilitarization of Ukraine post the disintegration of Soviet Union has come to haunt the Ukrainian state at this moment, and the mere existence of a state without a strong military is now seriously debated all around the world. Friends, if we look at what this crisis will do to Joe Biden, we will understand that Biden will not gain in any way from this crisis. Why am I saying so? Because the ghosts of Taliban are still in the air. The debacle which the American forces had to face in Afghanistan, the wounds are still fresh. And if now the Russian aggression becomes so powerful that the American resistance could not counter it, then Biden will lose his faith and goodwill that he has with the American people. In fact, there would be a stark contrast between the Biden administration and the previous Trump administration. Trump failed on several accounts, but we must all give credit to Trump for the peace that he ensured between Russia and the West. And if Biden fails to ensure that peace again, then it is going to cost United States of America heavily. It will not only destroy the American hegemony, but it will also raise serious questions on the American leadership as far as the NATO alliance is concerned. It will also become very difficult for Joe Biden to come back to the president's chair when he would be fighting in the next elections. There are rumblings of resentment already in several quarters of United States of America. Several sections of the American population, they have started raising doubts on Biden's capability as a leader. So China will feel emboldened, Russia will feel emboldened, whereas US will lose its territory both in the real world as well as in the world of hegemony. This is a sure indication that the world is moving or transforming from unipolarity to multipolarity. United Nations at this point is functioning like a defunct body. And it was ironical that when the Ukrainian representative to the United Nations was appealing before the United Nations Security Council to put an end to this war, Russia is sitting in the chair. Russia is presently having the leadership of the UNSC. And that's why when the Ukrainian representative demanded that the UNSC should intervene and stop Putin, it fell on deaf ears. That's why if we do not give more power to United Nations and its provisions do not create enough obligations, especially on the members of the Security Council, then it will soon turn into a laughing stock and it will meet the same fate as the League of Nations met. Friends, if we speak economically, you would see that Russia is the second largest exporter of crude oil in the world after Saudi Arabia. That's why this crisis will surely push the crude oil prices up. And it is no surprise that since 2014, it is the first time when the crude oil prices, specifically speaking, the Brent crude, has crossed the $100 mark per barrel. It is presently trading at 105 point something dollars per barrel. And if the global oil prices surge, then there will be an oil havoc on the cards. The OPEC countries will take some sort of advantage of this perilous situation and they will push the oil prices up in order to make the exorbitant profit which they want to make. They will try to fetch as many petrodollars as they could by taking advantage of this crisis. Countries like India, which are heavily dependent on imports as far as oil is concerned, will have to face the music. There will be import push inflation in India, and that will have spillover effects on different sectors of the economy. Friends, the world is still recovering from the pandemic, and if this oil crisis hits the world now, then it would be a double blow in a short period of time, and the recovery curve would be severely halted. If we look at the stock markets, you will see that the stock markets have already plummeted in several countries. The Dow Jones Index, the Nifty, the Sensex, all are trading in the south and in the red territory because this crisis has the potential of developing into a global crisis. Business sentiments have been affected throughout the world. Several businessmen now feel that it is not the right time to invest in the different economies, especially those who are directly or indirectly embroiled in this conflict. So, be it the stock markets or be it the oil prices, both will take a hit because of this ongoing price crisis. Friends, you also see that if Russia continues to launch the offensive on Ukraine, then it will also create instability in Europe, which has seen peace since the end of the World War II. Again, there would be different groupings in Europe, and the dirty game of power politics will ensure. If we try to analyze all this crisis from an ethical viewpoint, you will see that it's a case of ethics in international relations. And the realpolitik or realism of Kautilya, Niccolo Machiavelli, is fully out in the open. Every country for itself. And the lesson that India can learn from this crisis is we should not depend on any other country for protecting our geopolitical and geo-economical interests. We should stand firm on our own legs and should be ready to face all kinds of economic and political offensive. The West has reacted by imposing severe sanctions on Russia. But you see, friends, these sanctions appear to be very half-hearted. Why am I saying so? Because although United States of America has declared that there would be a complete shutting down of trade with Russia, it has not spoken about what is going to be the fate of the oil supplies which start from Vladivostok and reach till the western coast of United States of America. Further, Germany has recently installed a pipeline with Russia, and if sanctions are imposed over Russia, then the repercussions of that sanctions or those sanctions will be felt in Berlin as well. And is Berlin ready to bear that pressure, especially when Europe is coming out of a crisis like any other part of the world, which was imposed due to the onslaught of the novel coronavirus or COVID-19? So these sanctions appear to be very half-hearted. Americans have also promised weapons. In fact, Britain and France have also supplied weapons to Ukraine. But can Ukraine, with a lopsided military and civilians who are now to be trained as military personnel, stand against a well-trained army which is carrying the most modern weapons in the world? The S-400 has been the game changer in this entire conflict because it's an air defense missile system, and that's why you see that it can clearly and very rightly change the balance of war in a whisker of a time period. That's why you see that India has made a great choice by purchasing that weapon, especially when we are living in a hostile area and we have hostile neighborhoods. Friends, so if we just see this thing from an ethical viewpoint, you would see that realism or realpolitik is what is dominating. Idealism or every country will cooperate with each other and they all will help in each other's time of crisis looks good, but only on paper. When it is international relations, every country is for itself. And when you look at from the realpolitik or the realism ideology of Machiavelli and Kautilya, you will find merit in it. Friends, also at this point, we must understand that there is a kind of breach of social contract and fulfillment of social contract at the same time. When we talk about the breach of social contract, it is the breach which is being done by the United Nations Security Council. The entire world has pinned its hope on UNSC that if there is some disturbance in any part of the world, the UNSC will rush into that place and restore peace. But first in Afghanistan and now in Ukraine, the UNSC is appearing to be completely helpless. And obviously, it's not a surprise because when USA decided to invade Afghanistan, the UNSC remained silent, and therefore it's now Russia's turn. And if Russia is invading Crimea first and now into Ukraine, then you see it's a kind of quid pro quo that exists between different members, permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. So it's a breach of the social contract. The UN appears like a mockery at this point. Whereas, if you see, this is also a fulfillment of a social contract. There exists a great cultural similarity between the Ukrainian people and the Russian people. In fact, when the Russian forces crossed the Ukrainian borders and entered into the Ukrainian territory, several sections of the Ukrainian population welcomed the Russian move, although Putin is facing some resistance from his population and some sections are presently protesting in Moscow. But if you look at the number of people welcoming Russia's invasion into Ukraine, you will get to understand that this welcoming that the Ukrainian people are extending before the Russian forces stems from a common identity. Because since the Soviet days, these people have always been together. And as a part of the post-Soviet world order, it was decided that Ukraine will not have any nuclear installations or weapons. On the other hand, Russia promised that it will acknowledge Ukraine as a sovereign, independent state. Ukraine, it started depending on United States of America since the early 90s, and that dependence grew with time. America has oil interests as well as geopolitical interests in that region. Ukraine wanted to be a part of NATO, and in fact, the present establishment of Ukraine, it showed enough inclinations to join NATO. This angered Putin. Putin said that if NATO comes to the Russian borders, it will be a threat to Russia's security and sovereignty. Well, who is right at this moment? None of them are, because both have their own interests. Obviously, China at this moment is watching everything very closely. And if Russia succeeds, then in the near future, we are to enter into an era of multipolar world, wherein United States of America, the Russian Federation, and the People's Republic of China will compete against each other for global dominance and hegemony. Friends, what should India do at this moment? Well, if I have to summarize this in one line, I would say that India should focus on its military capability building, and it should strengthen its economy. And for that, India must never stop the train of economic reforms, because economy or a flourishing GDP provides the bedrock over which a strong military could be built. Well, friends, looking at this crisis, I can only say that let's hope this crisis ends soon, this war ends soon, and peace is restored in that part of the world. Because in a warlike situation, it is the ordinary people who have to suffer the most.